start. Okay, you are live.
Hi, this is Councilman Rich Swirsky. I'm the first ward council person. I'm also the chair of this committee, and with me today is my co-chair, Linda Mobian, who has put together a nice list of speakers for us. The last week, our committee, or 2 weeks ago, our committee met and discussed community policing efforts, both in the past and present. And we have minutes to that last meeting to approve. Is Councilman Freeman, are you with us?
I am.
All right, excellent. Okay. So, and I see there's a bunch of other guests, Councilman Malik, and two of our interns. Hold on a second. Let me make sure I don't skip ahead, but let's for the council members, let's go ahead and approve. Councilman Freeman is here and Mrs. Mobian. Let's go ahead and approve the minutes of the last meeting. So do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so the minutes are approved and we can probably get right to our program. And again, I want to introduce, but before we get to the program, let me just introduce our guests. These Trevon Richardson, you are one of the interns from the University of Akron. Hello, can we unmute him? Hello, Sarah, can we unmute him?
Yes, I am.
There you go. Okay, just give us one sentence about yourself. What are you studying, and did you grow up in Akron, or?
I grew up in Akron. I'm studying criminology, and I graduate in December.
Great. That's the best time of being in college is when you graduate, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and my son graduated from there as well, and my daughter got her master's from there, so University of Akron. And in fact, I taught there part-time at one point. Shelby, would you like to say a couple sentences about yourself? Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I am also, I'm graduating in the spring, so I'm a senior, and I'm studying sociology, criminology, and law enforcement. Oh,
great. And all those things kind of interconnect, and so it's great to have you. It'll be a good experience for you, but also it sounds like you guys are going to be very helpful to this whole process. And Mr. Lynch, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Good evening. I'm Sean Lynch. I am a forensic manager at Community Support Services.
Oh, okay. I'm jumping ahead here. Sorry.
Yep.
Okay. Mrs. Amobian, you want to introduce the guests that are here today?
Just make sure you can hear me okay. Is my voice okay, Sarah?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sounds good to me. Sounds good.
Last week we spent time talking about community policing and working in the neighborhood and doing foot patrol and a lot of other things around the area of prevention. So I thought, as I talked with the chair, that would be a good way to start segueing into all of the resources we have in Summit County, Akron, to help us with that. Because as we rethink and reimagine public safety, I think we need to start looking at different ways of helping our police officers out. So one of the things I thought we would do is pull together clinicians, individuals who work with me. There's nothing better than to ask people who work all day long to come to a council meeting after 5 and spend time with us reimagining public safety. So I have with me Terry Shavers, who is the mental health court forensic supervisor. I have to look at all these titles. And I have Sean Lynch, who is the forensic manager. And Kathy Barnhart, unfortunately had an emergency, had to go to the urgent care. So she was going to be with us, but Sergeant Jamie and I will handle that piece. But basically I invited all of my colleagues who are doing all kinds of tremendous work with best practices, evidence-based programs, just doing some things in the community, working with law enforcement. So I said, no better way to talk about this subject than to have the individuals who do it come and talk with us. Let me start by giving you an overview of community support services. It's a comprehensive behavioral health care organization that's been around for 32 years. And we have a large array of all kinds of services. We have case management, we have everything you can think of in that area, homeless outreach services, crisis intervention, assertive community treatment teams. We can talk about that, representative payee services. We have a lot of clinical services as well. When you think about clinical services, you think about psychiatric services, medical doctors who are psychiatrists. We have day treatment, we have counseling, we have nursing services. We provide services to older adults. We provide group services, art therapy, cognitive enhancement therapy, all kinds of programs that we provide to help our community. Employment services, housing services, a whole range of housing options available in Summit County and Akron. We added something about, I always say it's about 10 years ago, maybe a little longer than that now. It's medical services, and we call it the Neighborhood Health Center. It's FQHC lookalike, and we provide all kinds of medical services, primary care clinic, nursing, wellness programs, again, dental, podiatry, optometry, lab services. You name it, we're providing all of those services. Because what we found though, when we work with the population that we work with, if we have services under one umbrella, the chances are people will take advantage of those services. And we all know that individuals with mental health issues live 25 years less than the average person. And we want to do whatever we can to prolong their lives by providing all of these services. So what we try to do is not only continue to provide all of the traditional services, but look at the cutting edge programs that are available outside of the typical services I just identified. And let me jump into crisis intervention team. As I indicated, Kathy Barnhart, who is really the guru and the one who knows the program the best, she had an emergency, but you can't let one person stop anything. So she apologized, but she can be with us at another time. We just celebrated the 20th year in Summit County of having the crisis intervention team. And this is a program that originated in Memphis, Tennessee. And when the Adam board heard about the CIT program, they sent Lieutenant Mike Woody to Memphis, Tennessee to be trained in it, to learn about it, to bring it back to Summit County. And he was the one who helped us develop this program 20 years ago. And essentially, it's a program, it's a method of de-escalating mental health crises. And what they found in Memphis, Tennessee, as they have in other communities that are using it, is that when you have a trained police officer who is trained in understanding mental illness and working with social workers and doctors and doing things in the community with people who know the population best, that you have less tragedies, less fatalities, less physical interventions that end up being pretty regrettable. So what we have found is that over the 20 years that we've offered this program in Summit County, and CSS has provided the space and the training for about, I think, the last 15 years. We bring in about 24 officers, law enforcement officers from around the county who will come in and be trained for, I think it's like 3-4 days, almost a week. And please, Terry or Sean, jump in if I misrepresent something. But they come and they go out into the field with case managers, making home visits. And before they do that, they have doctors who come in. Dr. Douglas Smith, who is the chief clinical officer for the Adam Board, he oversees the program. And essentially what he does, he puts together an agenda, bringing in psychiatrists, nurses, social workers, and all other providers of mental health services, and go through all of the kinds of diagnoses, the symptoms, displaying what the behaviors look like, talking about the medications, the side effects, and then suggesting different ways of addressing these individuals if you see them. Because what we're trying to do is help them understand the illness, because most of the folks that they intervene with us are individuals that are not engaged in treatment, who need to be involved in treatment. And when they're not in treatment or taking their medications, they can manifest some serious behavioral issues and can come across as being violent or angry or whatever. And it's just a matter of knowing how to approach the individuals and knowing what to do under what circumstances. And what Kathy does, and Sergeant Donahue, I'm gonna look to you to help me out with this. She goes out on Monday evenings with, she rides along in the police cruiser, and basically she gets referrals from case managers and other mental health providers saying that this person hasn't been seen for a while and we're concerned because we know when he's off his medication or when she's off her medications and not engaged in treatment, she can do some rather bizarre kinds of things. We want to get ahead of them by having them go out. They will go and knock on a door, introduce themselves, ask to speak to the client if they find the person, and try to encourage them to come in for treatment. And basically, if they find them in need of treatment that night, for instance, they can always take them to PES, the Psychiatric Emergency Services, for an evaluation and a possible 23-hour hold on the Crisis Stabilization Unit, or in that area where the PES program is, and they can be considered for the Crisis Stabilization Unit. But they also ride along during the week, during the day, and make daytime visits. And if they happen to find someone that we are concerned about, they can bring that person into the agency to be evaluated and hopefully treated. And if the need for them to go into the hospital because they may have been off their treatment for a while, we can arrange to have that happen as well. And a lot of times they're riding down the street in the cruiser and they may see somebody walking along the sidewalk or whatever, and they'll pull over and talk to the person and try to encourage them to get into the cruiser and come to the agency with them. But they use those kind of methods and approaches to try to get people back into treatment so they won't have the kinds of concerns or problems that they've had. And that is a way of addressing the situation. And as I stated, we probably in the 20 years have touched every law enforcement agency within Summit County. And I think you'll probably find every law enforcement provider in Summit County that either have had or have officers on their staff currently who are well-trained. And when we have an issue in their community, we can call that police department and say, may I talk to your CIT trained officer? And ask them to meet us at somebody's house or go out on a visit. And they do have the authority to either pink slip. Pink slip is when you write an order for someone to be admitted to the hospital against their will. And the hospital can hold them for 3 days at least to do an evaluation. At the end of the 3 days, if they do not determine that the person is of danger to himself or others, or in any immediate way of harming themselves, they have to let them go. But they can involuntarily order them to stay if within their 3-day period, they see some symptoms and concerns that they have. But the law enforcement officers do have the authority to pink slip. Trying to think, is there anything else you can think of? It's one of the best practices, and you will find that a lot of the communities are getting officers trained. And again, you have a clinician that's going out with them. They are working together. I would imagine that Kathy may take the lead sometimes. I don't know, Lieutenant Sergeant Jamie, I'm sorry, Sergeant Jamie, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this forum. I'll tell you, I can't be more proud of the fact that, for 20 years, we've pushed the agenda for CIT, Akron being the first one in Ohio and one of, I think, only 6 at the time across the country. So for 20 years, we've been pursuing, educating other officers to be trained in CIT. I think over the years, probably we've had maybe approximately 120 officers from Akron. We have about 110 that are still active on our department, some of them have moved up in rank and are no longer in patrol, but they still have that skill set. And I'll tell you, on a daily basis, I see our officers using those skills in getting people treatment and diverting them from the criminal justice system. Also, we were able to decrease injuries to both the consumer and the officer. So those are some serious pluses to our program. And last week we just had another class, and almost universally at the end of it, everyone thanked us, and they couldn't say how good it was to go through the training, how they appreciate it, how they thought this is gonna be a great practice for them. So I can't say enough on how impactful it is to those officers.
Yeah, and the training is 40 hours long, and they, as I indicated, they go through various learning opportunities of mental illness, developmental disabilities, dementia, medication and the side effects, suicide and substance abuse. Again, they hear from all kinds of folks who are practitioners. They hear from other police officers, judges, and they hear from clients themselves who will tell some personal stories about different situations that they have faced. And it's been a wonderful opportunity to work closely with the officers. And you can imagine, as a social worker or a counselor, you go into the field and you're sometimes kind of nervous and concerned. But then when a person sees an officer with you who's dressed in a uniform, sometimes that uniform can make them kind of act a little better. And it's a prevention on both sides. It prevents the clients from getting hurt and prevent the officers from having to exercise any kind of physical restraint, all those kinds of things. So it's a really wonderful tool. And, as Sergeant Donahue said, the skills come in handy, and I'm sure we've de-escalated a lot of situations that could have been very harmful. And so that is what CIT is all about. And again, every law enforcement, I'm looking at the paper here, division in the county has been touched. New Franklin, Northfield Village, Lakemore, Talmadge, the Sheriff's Office, even the police department at Children's Hospital, probably the University of Akron. So it touches all these entities to give them the training they need so they're prepared for those kind of crises that they encounter. And keep in mind, CSS is one of those many agencies under the umbrella of the Adam Board system. And we have a network of organizations that serve this county. And I tell you, we all work very well together. It's a collaboration. I know when I spoke with Mrs. Swirsky last week, we talked about Candace Palante. And certainly, I'm sure we will probably want to invite her to come, because she's an officer of the court, and she goes out with police officers at times as well. And she can write an affidavit for an evaluation for someone to be seen that's in crisis or something. So we'll have her come, I'm sure, at some point in time. And she works not only for the Adam Board Crisis Center, but she works for Portage Path Behavioral Healthcare Organization. So again, we all work together, and we provide these comprehensive services. So what I thought we would do next, we'll go to the mental health court. Now, these other two programs you're going to hear about, mental health court and Hope Court, these individuals have already been involved with the legal system, but these courts are designed to keep them from engaging in further criminal activities and keep them engaged in treatment. So I'll go maybe mental health court, Terry. Okay. This is what Judge Stormer, Eleanor Stormer, started how many years ago?
20 plus years now.
20 plus years ago.
Yes.
And now Judge Williams is overseeing the court. So I'll turn it over to you, Terry, so you can, and further introduce yourself. I know you've given your name and title, but you can talk about how long you worked in CSS and all that good stuff.
Thank you for inviting me, Linda, and the council. My name is Terry Shavers, and I've been at Community Support Services 25 of the 32 years that it's been open. I've been in many positions, but I am currently the forensic supervisor. So I do two different teams, the forensic team and the mental health court team. So I'm going to address the mental health court team, which currently We have 2 courts operating. One is in Akron with Judge Annalisa Williams, and the other one is in Stowe with Judge Lisa Coates. I have case managers that go to both of those courts and work right alongside with the probation officers. And I also have a jail liaison. My jail liaison is there before court even starts, and she is at arraignment 4.5 days a week going through the dockets, looking for current and previous community support services or Portage Path, or anyone with a severe and persistent mental illness who has gotten a legal charge due to being off their medications. And so she will flag those people and talk to those people when they're at arraignment and explain what mental health court is and see if they are interested in the program. I must say that mental health court is a voluntary program. So the client has to be willing to engage in treatment. And if they are part of the diversion program, which could be anywhere from 12 to 18 months, if they complete mental health court, that charge is dismissed from their record. And it has to be a misdemeanor 1 or 2. And we've had, like we were saying, in Akron, it's been over 20 years, and Stowe last year celebrated 10 years. So we have case managers that work directly with these clients. They do everything from getting them intake to our agency if they're not currently a client, to getting a chemical dependency assessment. Every client in the program must have that, because we need to know, do they currently have or have they previously had any substance abuse treatment issues? And if so, we get them involved both on the mental health side and with chemical dependency. We have had some that do inpatient. We use IBH, we use Oriana, we use various programs. Whatever that client needs, we help get them into those programs. And they are seen at the mental health court in Akron. We meet every 2 weeks. And right now we are doing it on Zoom, as just about everybody probably is. But the clients have learned how to log on via Zoom. And if they don't have a smartphone, they've learned how to call in. And so there is an agenda they are put in. And Judge Williams, the probation officers, the case managers, and the court liaison, and myself, and also the public defender's office, are all on that call with the clients. And we go over the agenda to see what their progress is, just like we would do if we were actually in court. Once they complete the program, their charge is dismissed. And when we actually have a graduation ceremony, and they are allowed to invite friends, family members. And it is just amazing to hear the clients when they get to the end of the program and say how grateful and thankful they are. Because, at the beginning, some of them didn't think they needed the program. But then once they start, going through all the steps, and it's a lot. Initially, they have to be seen every single week by the case manager, the judge every 2 weeks, and their psychiatrist once a month. But at the end of the program, many of them are very, very thankful, and they do continue with the psychiatric services even after they've graduated. They just move to a regional team, but they do stick with the agency. They continue taking their medications, and they try and become productive citizens of Akron. Go ahead.
I'd say we'd wait till everybody's done.
Okay.
I'll get back to you.
Okay.
I can't violate my own thing.
Okay.
It's kind of hard sometimes to lose your train of thought and forget the question too. I understand.
No, I have the question. I just
Okay.
figured I'd said we'd wait till everybody talks, then we'll start asking. Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Sean, you want to go next, and please introduce yourself and talk about how
Sure.
you've been with us.
Sure. Good evening. I'd like to thank council, especially Councilwoman Mobian, for inviting me to speak. I'm Sean Lynch. I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor with training supervision designation and a licensed independent chemical dependency counselor with clinical supervision endorsement. I'm employed by Community Support Services as forensic manager, where my focus is on providing and supervising care to individuals living with severe mental illness involved in the criminal justice system. I'm going to speak with you this evening about the Forensic Assertive Community Treatment, or FACT program, and the Hope Corps program. FACT is a program of the Akron Municipal Court. It was developed in 2013 to serve individuals who have a diagnosed severe and persistent mental illness with psychotic experiences. The FACT program aims to serve the individuals that are often ineligible for other programs due to their lengthy criminal history and risk of recidivism. In order to be eligible for FACT services, an individual must have a qualifying mental health diagnosis, a history of repeated misdemeanor offenses, a current misdemeanor charge before the court, and must not be a current registered sex offender, have a current sex crimes charge, or have a history of sexual offenses. Individuals who participate in the FACT program are sentenced to do so, and their consent is not necessary to be placed in the program. Once sentenced, individuals are linked with intensive case management services, and typically individuals in FACT are seen anywhere between 1 and 5 times per week by the case management team. They're also linked with psychiatry, primary care, and a probation officer who works closely with both the FACT and mental health court programs. Linkage with other necessary services is common and based upon the individual's individualized service plan. The FACT team currently serves about 20 individuals. Of the individuals who are sentenced to the FACT program, roughly 90% do not recidivate within 1 calendar year of their termination. And over 90% of the individuals served have stable housing when they complete the program.
Whoa. Wow. That's quite remarkable. That's quite remarkable. My hat is off.
The case managers really, they really work hard to provide services. So the second program I'd like to tell you a little bit about this evening is the Hope Court program. This was developed in 2018. Some of you may be familiar. Hope Court was featured in the Beacon Journal, I think shortly after it was began, and also it just celebrated its 2-year anniversary. But it's a program of the Summit County Court of Common Pleas, presided over by the Honorable Allison Breaux. The purpose of the Hope Court program is to divert the mentally ill away from prison and into treatment. Individuals are considered eligible for this program if they have a severe and persistent mental illness with psychotic experiences, have a current felony, 3, 4, or 5 charge before the court. They must be a resident of Summit County and not have a history of violent crime. Individuals are referred by the judge who's assigned to hear their case. The program coordinator then screens the individual to determine if they meet admission criteria. And then if they do, they're referred for a mental health assessment to ensure that they meet the clinical criteria for the program. Once all of those steps are complete, the interdisciplinary treatment team determines whether the individual should be admitted to the program. And that interdisciplinary treatment team is composed of Judge Breaux, the program coordinator, who also serves as the program's probation officer, representatives from the prosecutor's office, and defense counsel. There's also treatment providers from Portage Path, Summit Psychological Associates, Coleman Professional Services, Oriana House, and myself from Community Support Services. And we work as a team to try to develop what makes sense for each individual as they're moving through the program. Once admitted to Hope Court, individuals are linked with one of the participating mental health agencies for case management, mental health counseling, psychiatry, and any other services as determined by their individualized service plan. Participants have their initial sentences reserved and are required to participate in felony probation and mental health and addiction treatment. The program takes roughly 2 years to complete, and the court uses a system of rewards and sanctions for compliance and non-compliance, respectively. In the rare instance that an individual does not cooperate and chooses to repeatedly violate the conditions of that program, their reserved sentence may be imposed. Currently, there are 35 individuals served by the Hope Court program, and there have been 3 graduates. Thank you.
That's
Thank
great.
you. Now, Mrs. Swirsky, you can ask your question.
Yeah. Okay. And Mrs. Shavers, I hope you don't mind. I want to go back to the CIT training. I want to ask about that and trying to get a little better handle. I mean, to begin with, how many people were in the last class?
24.
20.
I think each class is roughly about that. And each
Okay.
officer will go out will be assigned to a case manager. And that case manager will have that officer follow them throughout the day to appointments, to activities that they engage in with clients, so that they can get a feel for what the case managers are facing and because they go throughout the community. They're all over Akron and
Okay.
all over Summit County, actually.
Okay.
These
So
are the
we
whole
currently have about 24 officers, but I think the figure was that at one point in recent years, we've had over 100 have gone through the training. Is that?
Yeah. Yeah, 24
Okay.
went through the recent class, but over 100 have been trained.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I don't know
Linda,
if the Captain Don, yes, please step forward.
I
Yeah,
just
go
got
ahead.
promoted.
Yeah.
I guess I just got promoted. So over the 20 years, we've probably had approximately 180 Akron officers go through. We probably have 110 approximately who are still CIT certified. Now, those officers have been, some have been promoted. They've gone to different areas, and detective or crime scene. So they're not out on the street doing their CIT, but they are still CIT certified officers.
Oh, how many is that? How many is that?
Approximately 180 have gone through it.
Okay, and how many are on our police force that interact with, residents or criminal situations?
So we have 110 who are certified.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean that they're all in patrol divisions.
Okay.
But they continue to have their certification.
Okay, how many are in the patrol divisions? Do you have those numbers?
I don't have that number, but I can check for you.
Could you get that for us? Okay.
I will.
And
Yes.
and how many? I'm wondering how we decide. We get a call to the police department. We get many calls. How do we decide? And the numbers, I think, have already been accumulated. How do we decide which calls then get referred to mental health services, or do we do that after an officer has first gone out? How do we? Yeah.
What we try to do, Mr. Swirsky, is when we have a situation that we have some concerns about, we have concerns because a person hasn't been in treatment. They may have a history of violence or being out of control or behaving bizarrely. And we are concerned about going to that residence alone. So we will go through Kathy Barnhart, who is the person that would have been here tonight. And she will link us with the officer or ask us, just call the police department. If it's in Akron, she does the rounds every 3 or 4 days a week, plus Monday evenings, as I indicated. She will identify when she's going out, and she will handle the situations in Akron because she's already going out with officers. If it's outside of Akron, like in Stowe, Monroe Falls, Twinsburg, or somewhere else, she will tell us the officer that she's worked closely with or somebody that she knows that's trained. So when you call, you can ask for this officer. If that person is working, then that person will be probably willing to go out with you and meet you there.
Okay, that's if community support services first is called, they will sometimes or often call the police and say, well, we have this case and would you like to work with us on it? Is that's that side of it. I see that. But when the police dispatch gets a call, how do they decide? Is there, there's been this idea that some of those calls ought to be directly handled and I guess, handed off to mental health services rather than an officer going out there, because this might be a way to reduce some stress on the police budget.
Sure.
And we are then also sort of maybe de-escalating some situations through the collaboration with social services. So I don't know, Mr. Donahue, can you explain that, how that happens? Someone calls the police department, they say, so people are out there acting crazy. They're out on this street, they're making noise. I know they're dealing drugs, they're threatening people. How do we decide whether some of this could be handled better from social service, or do we automatically send a patrol car? How do we do we already do this? Do we already weed some of these calls and send them to mental health facilities? Or maybe Captain Betzel could tell us about that.
James, go ahead and you can address
Someone
that.
from the
James.
police department. Yeah, thank you, Captain Betzel. Yeah.
Well, there you got a couple questions in your
Right.
questions. Okay,
Yes.
and maybe just to back up a little bit. So an
Yes.
officer, we get a code, and it could be a mental illness, and then we go out there and we determine whether it is in fact a mental illness call, but we may not know that till we're there. Some come in and we know directly that is what's going on. Your question about sending the mental health out to address these calls, it's problematic because we don't know until we come on scene the situation what's going to happen. We have no predictors, especially when it comes to mental health, if that person is stable or unstable. We may not know until we get there. We could go there and initially they are stable and then become unstable, which means it's very volatile. If there is not an officer there, that could be problematic for the mental health professional. We talked a little bit earlier about, outreach. The reason that outreach goes out with an officer is that very reason, because we don't know of the unknown. Is there be some validity to it? Is there something valuable? So we don't know. We have to make a determination when we're there. Just sending out a mental health professional is problematic because we don't know until we get there. We can assess the safety factors and make a determination of where and what resources we have to get this person treatment.
The one thing too to keep in mind, Mrs. Swirsky and others, is that oftentimes if it's someone that has been involved in mental health issues for a long time, the officers are aware of those individuals. And they somehow know those families, they know those clients, and they will call us directly or call PEZ directly. So it could go either way. If it's someone that's totally unknown to us and they go out and they've had the benefit of the CIT training, they might be able to assess almost right away that something else is going on here. And they may utilize one of the resources of taking the person into PEDS or whatever to be evaluated. But many times the individuals that we serve, they're severely mentally disabled. So they've been in the system for a long time, a lot of times. And this is not necessarily their first encounter with a crisis situation that may need to involve the police. But again, when we do that partnership, that collaboration, is who takes the initiative, who may lead, who takes the leadership and engaging that person. Because what you're ultimately trying to do is get that person to acknowledge that they need some help. And then we try to divert them to the help they need. It could be hospitalization for a short period of time and then come to the mental health system. Or it could be going to the crisis emergency services over there off Howard, and then going to that crisis stabilization unit. There are so many different avenues. But again, if they have been in the system and been sick for a long time, in and out of jail or whatever, chances are they're known to the officers. If it's a new situation, as Sergeant Donahue said, it's unknown. They go out and make an assessment. And that's the benefit of the CIT training, that they will have the skill set to assess that something else is going on here.
Can I add something?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so I just wanted to add, I just wanted to add, just to kind of bounce off what Sergeant Donahue was saying. Oftentimes, what we'll get will come in as potential person in mental crisis when it actually could be something completely different, like somebody who is having a really bad effect, drugs that they've taken that have had a really bad effect on them. We had that just yesterday with somebody running in and out of traffic. And so, and what Ms. Mobian was saying is absolutely true. I don't know what we would do in this area if we didn't have the collaboration that we have with CSS, and I don't know what other communities do that don't have those kinds of resources available to them for us to be able to take somebody to PEZ or to the hospital or those situations. But my concern would always be for the safety of any kind of a mental health worker or social worker that would come onto that kind of a scene without somebody in law enforcement with them, as well as the person in crisis, because Sergeant Donahue hit the nail on the head. You don't know what you have until you actually get there and assess it, which is why the training for CIT and that is so important, because we have the tools to assess, and then we can apply the resources that are necessary. And without that law enforcement part of it, to protect everybody involved, I would be very concerned for the safety of anybody who would come on a scene like that and could potentially be harmed by somebody who is maybe on drugs and mentally ill, or one or the other. We have several that are both, and we generally know who they are, but sometimes you just don't, like the one yesterday, you just don't.
Mm-hmm. So
Mr. Swirsky,
go ahead, Councilman Freeman.
Oh, just I have the same question that you had as far as how many officers with CIT training do we have that have their feet on the street right now? That's a question I'd like to know. And then I understand 40 hours for CIT, and this is for sergeant or captain, either one. What's the feasibility of all of our officers that are on the street getting some kind of condensed version of training when it comes to mental illness?
Well, I can tell you that the CEO of CSS has offered that. So when we were talking about doing this presentation tonight, he said, what if we could do the training, for the officers? So I'm sure he'll be more than willing to provide the staff and maybe the location to do more of that. We do it at least, how many times a year do we do it? Is it twice a year or more?
Twice a year.
Twice a year. So we do it twice a year. And you're talking about roughly 24 officers, but they are not all from Akron. They are from wherever. But certainly, CSS, I'm sure, and other partners would be more than happy to provide training to all of them.
Yeah, it would seem like if that was kind of a standard operating procedure, that, I understand not everybody's going to have a 40-hour training and be whatever CIT certified, but if everyone had at least a taste of what to look for, what to try to identify, if all of our guys on the street had something like that, I can just see that being very advantageous.
Well, they do absolutely have some of that training, especially in the academy. We don't put people out on the street without some ability to recognize persons in crisis, considering that's what we deal with every single day, all the time. We do just have some folks that are specifically trained with the 40 hours. So everybody does get some, but I'll be the first one to raise my hand and say, please bring on more training and give our officers more tools to be able to deal with persons in crisis, since we deal with it so often. You're absolutely right. So nobody over, you're not going to get an argument over here from anybody who would say we don't need any more training. More training you can give us to make everybody safe, the better.
I would say that's
great.
That's a big takeaway. I think that's a big takeaway.
Councilman Freeman, thank you for echoing my concern about what percentage of our officers who are currently interacting with residents, patrol, are trained in CIT, and is it a once a year thing? Could we,
at least twice a year, Mrs. Swirsky.
Twice a year. Okay.
Like
how many, maybe the police could tell us how many officers who are currently in patrol, how many are there total? Do we have a round number about that? How many are in patrol?
I think,
Well,
Sergeant?
We don't. I will get that to you. And just
That would be
to
great.
maybe
That'd be great.
add to Councilman Freeman's concerns, CIT officers, once they graduate, they have a belief system. They become mentors to other officers. And one of the things about police work is we share our knowledge. We share our skill sets. When officers who are not CIT trained, many times just might be with a CIT officer. So it's not necessarily the numbers specifically, but the officers that are involved, again, they are mentors to the other officers who we go on calls together. Might be 2 officers, 4 officers on scene, and it might be 1 CIT officer that by his just by observational, they'll see the skill sets that they have. So, but again, we're all about training more and getting more people through this program. If we can, that'd be great. But
Yeah,
I want to press that.
I could see how peer-to-peer influence might be really have a good qualitative effect. I would like to know whether this is systematic. Is there like a peer de-escalation program, peer-led de-escalation program that sort of passes on this knowledge in a systematic way? Is that something we could sort of, make a little more intentionally? Or is it already happening?
Well,
Yeah.
I hear people talking about de-escalation a lot as if it's a kind of a every single day. So, but I get what you're saying. And obviously, just like anything else, some people are better at it than others. But Jamie,
Yeah.
you were going to say something.
So you're saying that it is part of the culture.
Yes.
If you don't mind, it is part of the culture. A lot of it is happening already. But I'm wondering whether maybe we could just, make sure and somehow have it systematic and have it evaluated. How are we doing on that? I know there's an awful lot of really good police who like to share and teach, and experienced ones with newer, younger ones. I guess, as a councilman, I'm hoping that this is happening, and for the future this is happening systematically, and that it's a big part of how we evaluate how well we're doing with the police department. And is that part of evaluation? Skill of de-escalation?
I mean, we could talk more
Absolutely.
about it when we put together our report. We can get more information about that. Because one of the things I like for us to think about when we talk about de-escalation, and that's why I asked the question last week. I know we don't necessarily want to talk about these other things that are happening in other cities, but we're blessed that we've not had those. But I asked the question last week, 2 weeks ago, about Eric Garner, because I still, for the life of me, don't understand why the officers had to put their hands on him selling loose cigarettes. And I'm thinking that if we have somebody, he was definitely a repeater because they knew that he did this and had monitored and had seen him and had talked with him. In a situation like that, if we could utilize community resources in addition to providers of mental health services, family members, and others who can talk to a person like that and maybe get them to intervene, because I hope that we don't ever get to the point where officers, and I know they talked last week about a lot of the tools that they've used in their toolbox, and they're probably using this, but that's all a part of de-escalating something. Utilizing all the resources that you can, bring to bear. And that's the kind of thing I just don't understand. Even if you handed him a ticket every week, every day of the week, at some point, we know he probably wouldn't have paid them, or they don't pay them. But the fact of the matter is, you don't want folks having to put their hands on somebody for a petty misdemeanor like that. And
Yes.
we have to find other ways to intervene. And,
Absolutely.
And that
Absolutely.
is what, the officers kind of talked about a little bit last week. And that's when you bring all the resources that you can bring to bear on a situation like that.
Yes, we'd be glad to take guidance from Captain Betzel and Sergeant Donahue on, providing us with some data and numbers about that, but how we, sort of work with you and, possibly a consultant on how we just sort of look at it through that lens. How often, how many times this is being taught? I know as a teacher, even teachers will go to a training session once a year, and later on in the year, if they weren't using that lesson or that approach, they kind of would forget about the training. Now, I think in the police situation, I doubt if anybody's forgetting, but it wouldn't hurt if somehow we're reinforcing this approach in a variety of ways. And as Captain Betzel, she said, even during, when they first assemble, like there's a lot of ways it is being reinforced. But let's take a look at that and go over all those things. And if we already have a lot, that's great. And maybe there's a few more ways we could do it. That sometimes a few more ways of reinforcing the message can have big dividends. So,
Councilman Swirsky, just
yeah,
want to
go
add,
ahead. Yeah.
Just yesterday, I was on two mental illness calls. One where the guy was running in and out of traffic. Another one where the person with mental illness was inside a department store and they thought he had a gun. People were evacuated. Both of those incidents were de-escalated by the officers on scene, resulted in no use of force, and resulted in them going to the hospital for treatment. None of those officers, I believe, were CIT trained. But I'll tell you, on a daily basis, no one is better at conflict resolution or de-escalating than police officers. I was a social worker for 20 years. I don't know anyone that does it better than police officers. And no one does it better, from my observation, than the Akron Police Department on a daily basis.
Well, that is great. And I'm glad that you feel so confident of that. And it makes me feel more confident too. And I hope you understand, we know we're looking over your shoulder here a little, and nobody likes that. I don't like it. But we have people looking over our shoulders, I'll tell you that. And they want to make sure that we continue to avoid those kind of situations that people have, witnessed on CNN, these other cities where it just seems ridiculous. Something happened. And I feel good that you guys are open to dialoguing about it and taking a look at it, helping us develop a profile of how many times a day is an officer reminded, or if it's not every day, how many times a week. How do we keep this? Just like, you watch a basketball game or a football game, there's a lot of repetition from the coaches to the people participating. And in some ways, we're not even, councilman's not even a coach, but we're watching the game. We just want to make sure everything is being done. The messages, the training, the practice that gets people to the proficiency. It's in such important situations that the same level of, practicing layups before a game for the NBA, LeBron James is excellent, but he still practices every day and he still works at it. And we just want to make sure we're doing as much of that as possible. And that's something we'll be talking about with you on a more ongoing basis. We're getting close to 6. So, but if there's some other people who would like to ask questions or make some more comments, I don't know if anybody from the police department or Mrs. Shavers, anybody else like to make a comment or a question? Okay, well,
Well, I just
Mr.
like
Mobian,
to.
you good, or should we?
No, I'd like to thank Miss Shavers and Mr. Lynch. And Sean is on vacation, have you? So he may send you a bill, Mr. Swirsky.
Well, that's.
Thanks a lot, Sean, for taking some time out of your vacation to think about
Yeah, I know billable hours is. Yeah, I understand. I worked briefly for Applewood. And so I had a little bit of work with police, and we're in home-based counseling. And I think that, there is a branch of social work that really recognizes the value of working with the families. And, that's one of the things that we can consider.
What about
And I
the
wanna-
interns? Do you
yeah.
have anything you want to ask? Or
I'm not sure if you can see that Councilman Malik has his hand raised.
Oh, no, I couldn't see it.
Yeah.
I kept looking at him thinking he might, but okay, go
No,
ahead, Councilman Malik. Yeah.
So I did have one question, but Councilwoman Mobian mentioned the interns. If either of you guys have any questions, please feel free to go first. And
I don't have any questions right now.
okay.
Okay, that's great.
Well,
All right,
I put them on the spot.
close. I'm glad you brought up the interns because I want to talk with you. I think I had mentioned this, Miss Erickson. For this committee, we really, and I hope I get to you before other people do, but we really want help with best practices from around the country, particularly Ohio, particularly cities that are similar size. We just want to check and see if there's some way that some ideas that might be useful here. I know I just want to recommend a book for everybody. Is this coming out okay on the camera or is it backwards?
is it Until We Reckon or something?
Yes, Until We Reckon by Danielle Sered. I've read most of this. It not only includes an analysis of what's causing a lot of our criminal activity and maybe our approach to law and criminal justice particularly, but there's also some innovative programs that have been started in some other cities around the country. And it's just a good thing for checking ourselves about are we looking at this in the most compassionate and the most effective method that we can. Because really, and I'm just going to close with this, police officers are peace officers, and we just want to make sure that that's a true thing in the city of Akron. So unless there's one more comment, I think do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
No, Councilman Malik had a.
Oh, again, I couldn't see it. Sorry. Go ahead, Sean.
Sorry. Yeah. I think Sergeant Donahue. I just had a quick question that went back to some of the conversations about dispatch. So when safety communication gets a call in, it could be mental health, but it could be anything, right? Is there I know that a lot is unknown until you get out there into the field, but is there an assessment that the dispatchers do on like the threat level of that call?
Right. They would do a threat. I mean, obviously, if a weapon, more of a threat, right?
So
or
is
harm
there
to
like
self.
a priority scale or that kind of thing?
Yes, they do. Yes.
Okay.
And thank you for bringing that up, Councilman Malik, to your usual thoughtful question. Can we, it would be also, can you tell some more about how dispatch people are trained? And is that an ongoing process? And what are the qualifications? Since that seems like some very important decisions are made right then. What are their qualifications? What is their training? Could you please talk about that for us?
And some are CIP, I believe, right? Sorry, I just want to add that.
That's okay.
I just want to add that we also now, and I did this in the fall, de-escalation for dispatchers. So they're also being trained in de-escalation, and but their training and expectations, I would probably defer to one of our people here in dispatch, Lieutenant Simcox might be better to address that, or someone in that area.
Okay, that's, and I think we've highlighted a possible topic, because that seems to be the focal point for a lot of these different topics, which is our dispatch operation. And is it doing the best, everything it can to be a preventive operation. So that's good. That's good advice. And I think I definitely will follow up, and I know Mr. Bobby will probably support that. We'll follow up with maybe a meeting devoted to the dispatch operation, and the resource people that you mentioned. We will definitely invite them to present. That's a great idea, and that's a good segue. Unless there's other good thoughts coming near sometimes, I know. Okay, you counselors will be impressed with this. They call that doorknob therapy. when you're about to close the door and leave the room, or the person you're counseling is about to leave the room, and all of a sudden they tell you everything you wanted to hear? See, I do know a little bit. So any other doorknob therapy or comments here? Okay, so, okay, we'll go ahead and do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Yeah, so moved.
Okay. Second, very good. And all are in favor, and so we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you all.
And
And
Thank you.
interns, please get in touch with me. I want to talk with you, okay?